Can you just clarify if there are any differences between mainland and free zone?
Sure. So yes, Rehan, as you said, we did focus on mainland. Now, just for clarity, the federal law applies to all companies, mainland or free zone. Of course, when in saying that, we're not including DIFC companies that are subjected to a very different law based on common law. But even for free zone companies, they are subject to the federal law. What you would see in terms of differences is that there are certain free zones that have their own employment regulations, which would fall under the law. They're not on the same level in terms of weight. They're based on the law. They might be a little bit more detailed. But for example, JAVZA is one of the free zones that does have employment regulations. So JAVZA itself would then also expect you to comply with the regulations in addition to the federal law. So the law still applies. And then in terms of the relevant authority for employment, so yes, Mohri is the relevant authority and coming out of that tasheel for mainland companies. For free zones, again, there are different situations. For example, JAVZA does have its own labor department, labor office. Other free zones basically deal with tasheel, for example, or Mohri from the back end, but they just allow you to submit through them. They don't necessarily have a full-on separate labor department. So that will depend from one free zone to another. But again, the law applies to all except the IFC and common law jurisdictions within the UAE. What you might have on top of that is the free zone's own employment regulations.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know. So thank you very much for that. I'm just going to run through some of the questions asked in the comment section. And obviously, some of these questions could be quite detailed, and some of them you may need to take them offline. So feel free to mention which ones you want to take offline. We don't really have that much time left. So we've got about 10 minutes. So I'll just quickly run through some of the more straightforward ones. So there's a question about commission agent jobs. So I guess what this person's asking about is there are some agents who are on a commission-only basis, I guess. Do you mind shedding some light in how that would be treated under the law?
Sure. So practically speaking, because this is something that we've also had to deal with, the authority doesn't really recognize, or it doesn't have a specific contract that is commission based only. What you do have the option to do is to have a very minimal lump sum monthly salary, and then on top of that, you can have commission. But there isn't a purely commission basis contract that is available with the authority.
Oh, okay. No, that's great to know. Another question is, I think this is quite straightforward. I guess as a clarification, is the company charging the onboarding cost to the new employer or the employee? So I guess this goes back to the point that you mentioned about someone leaving within their probation.
100%. That's a very good question. The answer is it's charged to the new employer, and the mechanism that they have laid out as per the law, which unfortunately we still haven't seen being laid out in practice, which is the fact that this reimbursement is meant to happen between both companies, both employers, old and new, through the authority. So the company is not going to go out and reach out to the other employer. So this is meant to happen through the authority, as they are able to keep track once they're issuing a new work permit for an employee. And if they do have the record that that employee has resigned during probation, then that reimbursement will happen through the authority directly, not from the employee, and not directly from one employer to another. But as I said, Rehan, because we've not seen that practically happen yet, that mechanism is not there. So what we have seen, practically speaking, is that companies have opted for now to mention that these onboarding costs would be due from the employer or the employee, which we would not advise on, because as per the law, this reimbursement is meant to be paid by the new employer. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've got two similar questions, and it's all to do with the annual leave. So the first question is, do we still mandate that they use their annual leave even if they have a carryover policy? Second question is, some companies lapse the annual leave if they don't take it within 2 years. Is that allowed?
Okay, I'm going to answer the second question first. because that's something that we always try to highlight as much as possible. Companies need to know that the leaves do not disappear. Okay, if the leave lapses and the carry forward has already been for 2 years and they're not able to carry it forward even more, which means that the employee cannot use it, the company will have to pay the employee. So for companies to understand and HR individuals to know, there are only two options when it comes to leaves. Either the employee uses them or they get paid in lieu. Now, the difference in terms of timing has to do with when you'll be able to have whether both options or just one. So, for example, if I'm planning my employees' leaves, and that's to answer the first question too, even if I'm allowing them to carry forward, because I know, for example, if as a company we've decided that we want to allow employees to carry forward only 5 days of leave. So if I ask them to plan their leaves in advance and to make sure they take their leaves minus the 5 carry forward that they want to, that means that I will avoid having leaves that I have to pay them in lieu. Because if they do not end up taking the leaves, other than the carry forward, then I have to pay them. Now, companies can either pay in lieu of the leaves, unused leaves, either on a yearly basis or at the time of final settlement. That at the end of the day is up to the company. Most companies opt to pay it at final settlement. However, again, they do not just cease to exist. So please make sure that you either make sure that the employees take their leaves or that you're accounting on the fact that you're going to have to pay them in lieu of these leaves.
No, thank you very much for that. I've got another question. It says, is a mother eligible for 5 days parental leave apart from the maternity leave?
Yes.
Exactly.
I'll take ahead. I'll answer this question.
Okay.
So basically, the parental leave is in addition to the maternity leave. But the limitation with that is that this parental leave, needs to be taken within 6 months of the newborn's birth. So whether you're a mother or a father, you are entitled to these 5 days within 6 months. And it doesn't matter whether you have taken your maternity leave or not.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Same person asked another question, but I think you want to take that offline. Is if someone's contract is still not converted from unlimited to limited, is the end of service gratuity as per the old unlimited contract or as per the new unlimited contract? I think that's quite a complicated question to answer. So I think you might want to, whoever asked that question might just want to reach out to Noor and Natasha offline.
I would like them to reach out because the answer to that question is not as straightforward. It
Yeah,
depends on when the contract is expiring, pre or post the grace period. Because if it is post the grace period, then it's gonna have to be calculated as per the new law. So yes, I would please request the person that is asking this question to reach out to us so we can discuss this in more detail.
that's fine. I think we'll just take one more question and then we'll do the final kind of thoughts. There's one about overtime calculation. I know overtime can be a bit of a can be quite complicated, but is it the same person that's asked to elaborate on overtime calculation? Is there anything that you guys want to just mention about it that we as employees should kind of be aware of?
So I'll mention one thing first, and then I'm going to ask Natasha to also elaborate on that if she has anything that she wants to say. So the total, in terms of overtime, the total working hours need to be a maximum of 144 hours every 3 weeks. So that's your cap. Okay. So Natasha, if you want to elaborate on that even more.
Sure. Thanks, Noor. So, as per the law, overtime should not exceed 2 hours per day. And the working hours are 8 hours a day. So, the employee should not be working more than 10 hours per day. Although, in practice, that's not practiced. But in terms of the overtime calculation, the calculation breakdown is the basic wage plus 25% of the basic wage on top of that, so a total of 125%. However, if the employee is working overtime between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., then the overtime pay increases by 25%, so it would be a total of 150% increase. In addition to that, if for any reasons the company requires employees to work on a weekend or a public holiday, then they have the option to compensate the employees with another day off or compensation in lieu, which is based on 150% of the basic wage.
Cool. No, thank you. Thank you for that, Natasha. It's been a really great session. Thank you, Noor and Natasha, for providing your insights and answering a lot of the questions.